So if we're going to talk in lesson 4 here about adding integers or rational numbers of the same sign, we're probably going to talk about ones that have opposite signs or different signs, right? So that's going to be the focus of this video. We need to represent, again, there's a 5 and a 3, but 5 plus -3 using arrows on the number line. So if we go from 0 to 5, I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units to the right. And then this -3 tells me I'm going to move 3 units to the left because it's a negative. So I'm going to go here, 1, 2, 3. And I end up at 2. Let's go through the same questions we did before. How long is the arrow that represents 5? 5 units. From 0 to 5, it is 5 units. What direction does it point? +5, so it goes to the right. How long is the arrow that represents -3? 3 units. And what direction does that one point? To the left, because it's negative. Which arrow is longer? Now this is a different question than what we've seen before. Which one's longer? The one that's 5 units or the one that's 3 units? 5 units. So the 5-unit arrow. That's going to become really important because, as we're going to see in this next one, okay, when we add them together, notice that our sum here, or the solution to our problem, 5 plus -3, is a +2. So what is the sum? The sum is 2. And if you're going to represent the sum using an arrow, how long would the arrow be and what direction would it point? Well, if we went from like 0 to 2, it would be 2 units to the right because it's a +2. So I'm just going to say 2 units because the solution is 2. 2 units to the right. All right, so let's try this again, see if we can kind of come up with a theme. Represent 4 plus a -7. So I start from going from 0 to 4. And then I'm at the 4. The second one tells me I'm going to move 7 units, and since it's negative, to the left. So from the 4, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Again, you can use that bump method. Okay, and notice that we end up at -3. All right. So we're not necessarily answering the questions this time, but I want you guys to notice something. Okay, notice in this case which arrow is longer. The arrow that's longer is the one that's the 7. And notice that pulls us into the negative side of the number line. Okay, so when we add rational numbers with opposite signs, we're going to subtract the absolute values. Same sign, add the absolute values. Opposite sign, subtract the absolute values. We're going to use the sign of the integer with the greater absolute value, the longer arrow. So, in this one right here, 7 had the longer arrow. Our answer, 7 was negative. Our answer is negative. Up here, 5 was the longer arrow. 5 is positive. Our answer is positive. So we're going to subtract the absolute values and then take the sign of the one that has the greater absolute value. Show you what you mean here. Okay? This says circle the integer with the greater absolute value. The absolute value of -1 is 1. The absolute value of 2 is 2. And you don't have to write this out every time. I want you to see that 2 has a greater absolute value. So if 2 has a greater absolute value, was our sum, the solution to this addition problem here, that's a plus sign, is going to be positive or negative? We don't have to figure it out. Well, 2 is positive. Our answer is going to be positive. Circle the integer with a greater absolute value. Does 5 or -9 have a greater absolute value? Remember, absolute value is distance from 0. Which one's farther away from 0? -9. The answer is going to have the sign of the integer with the greater absolute value. So if 9 is the greater absolute value, then our answer will be negative. Negative 6 and 3. Which one's farther away from 0? Negative 6. So what will our solution be? Negative. Hopefully you're starting to get the hint here. Negative 11 and 1. Negative 11 is farther away from 0, greater absolute value. Solution will be negative. Now, we're going to use this idea along with subtracting their absolute values to figure out how to do it without a number line. So, negative 10 and 7. The absolute value is 10 and 7. So I am going to go 10 minus 7, and I'm going to get 3. My answer is going to be a 3. Is it going to be a negative 3 or positive 3? Circle the greater absolute value. Negative 10 is farther away from the number farther away from 0 on the number line 7. Since 10 is this negative 10, the answer will be negative. Does not matter which one's bigger or smaller. Absolute values of 8 and 16, just go 16 minus 8. Bigger minus smaller, that's 8. Will my answer be a positive or a negative 8? Well, negative 16 has a greater absolute value. The solution is going to be a negative 8. And think of it, if you go up 8 on the number line and you come back 16, you're on the negative side of 0. 12 and 65, take their absolute values. 65 minus 12. 53. Positive or negative 53? 65 greater absolute value, 65 is positive, answer is positive. 105 and negative plus negative 126, just subtract the absolute values, bigger minus smaller. And I don't usually do the bigger minus smaller thing, but it's how we do this. 21. Will it be a positive 21 or a negative 21? Circle the greater absolute value. Which one's farther away from 0? The negative. So our answer is negative. Same sign, add, keep the common sign. Opposite signs, subtract, then the sign of the one with the greater absolute value, the one farther away from 0 on the number line. All right, let's just try a few more quick examples. Be done. Solve the following problems to show your work. Find the sum of negative 18 and 7. Different sign, subtract. That's 11. Positive or negative? Well, negative 18 is greater absolute value. Sign is negative 11. If the temperature was 73 degrees outside, that's a positive 73. But it fell, remember that, rising and falling? 19 degrees, that's a negative 19. What is the temperature at 10? Write an equation, equal sign, and solve. So if I go 73 plus a negative 19, what does that equal? We don't know, so put an X there. Different sign, subtract. Is this going to be a positive or a negative 54? This is greater. This will be positive. All right, the very last one, guys. We're going to write an addition sentence and then find the sum using the diagram. So, remember we're starting from 0 and we're going down to negative 10. That means negative 10 we start with. Then we're adding. What are we going to add to it? Well, notice from our arrows here, we're going to go up 3.5. So I'm going to add 3.5 to it. It's a sentence, so it needs an equal sign. What does it equal? Well, if we come down here, we can see it's halfway between the negative 6 and the negative 7. So it's going to equal a negative 6.5. Big ideas here, guys. Maybe, if I can show you. Adding integers. There we go. Adding integers with the same sign means we add their absolute values and use the common sign. But if they're opposite signs, take the absolute value, subtract the absolute value, bigger minus smaller. The answer is going to take the sign of the integer that has a greater absolute value. If they're fractions or decimals, we're going to follow the same rules.